Hey guys, welcome. I'm Scott. This is one of my boys, Brady, with me. We're headed out of the marina to go crabbing here in Oregon. We're in a boat today, but almost everything that we'll do can be done from a public pier or a dock. So in this video, we're going to show you the 5 things that you'll need, and we'll give you all the information to get you started so that you, on your own, can catch some delicious Dungeness crab. The first thing that you're going to need is a shellfish license. For a resident of Oregon, it's about $10. A non-resident's about $28. You're going to need one if you're over 12 years old. You can get it on the Oregon ODFW app, or you can get it at most any sporting goods store. Number 2 on your list is going to be gear. When I say gear, I mean your pot, your trap, your ring, whatever you're going to use to catch the crab. There are quite a few different ways to go about it, and so we're going to go over each one individually so that you can have a look at it and see which one you'd like to go with.
So these green pots are the biggest, heaviest pots. This one has 3 doors. 1, 2, 3. The crabs can climb up in there and go in there, and then they get stuck. They're eating the bait, and they're working on the bait, and they get stuck. They can't get out. These big pots are kind of nice because they have the built-in bait box. At that lid, you just put the bait right in there, the chicken or the fish or whatever it is, and then you just close the lid, send it down. When you pull it up and you want to get your crabs out of there, you just open the big lid, you grab your crabs out of there, and then when you're sending it back down, you just close it up, put your bait cover over, latch it down with the bungee and the hook. Now these pots are a little heavier than some of the other pots. It'll help you in the current. It won't move as much in the current or possibly tip upside down, but it is harder to lift up. These green pots are the most expensive of the type we're looking at today. So this line here, this is lead core line. It's for sinking so that it won't get in somebody's prop if you're throwing it out from a boat. If you're off a pier or a dock, you can use floating line, it's just fine. But if you're going to be putting your lines anywhere that a boat might travel, you really should use sinking line. As far as buoys, if you're going to be throwing from a pier or a dock, you don't even need buoys. You can just tie your rope directly to the pier or the dock. If you're going to be throwing it from the boat, you need to have buoys, and you need to have your name, phone number, or license number on it. Okay, this pot is a little bit different. It's a lighter weight pot. It has one opening in the top. It's a smaller opening than the green pot that we just showed you. So we'll pull our lines and our buoys out of here. This is where we store them after we put the pots away each time. This trap is a Danielson trap. It has the one opening in the middle of the top there. There are 4 doors in this trap. It's a rectangular trap, so there's one on each side, obviously. So these doors are pretty lightweight, and the current alone can sometimes hold them open. So sometimes people will put weights on those doors so the crabs can't crawl right back out. Since these traps don't have a bait box like the other ones do, the built-in bait box, you have to use a bait bag. So you've got this mesh bag that you put the bait in the top, cinch it down on the top there, and clip it on. One potential issue with this is you've got that long cord there. If that thing swings around, goes into a corner like that, sometimes the crab can get to that bait without ever going in the pot, which of course is a bad thing. So it's best to shorten that up. You can wrap it around there sometimes, or just shorten the cord altogether and then just keep it in the middle. You could even zip tie it to the bottom or do things like that. But bait bags work well, but you got to keep them in the middle. One thing about these Danielson traps that's kind of cool is they will fold down flat. You can store them much easier, haul them in your car or your truck easier, and so they're pretty handy that way. They'll fold down almost completely flat. And that's it for the blue Danielson type trap. So this trap is probably the most unusual of the traps that we have. This is very similar to the big green one, the first trap we showed you, but this one is a fair amount smaller, and it only has one door. It's really meant for a kayak, something like that, something that it won't take up a lot of room. It has one door on the side and then one similar door on the top for getting the crabs out and putting your buoys and your bait bag and that sort of thing in. But it's quite small. And on this one, you definitely want to have that bait bag in the middle because the trap itself is so small. You definitely don't want them getting a free meal without getting caught in your trap. As far as cost, these cost more than the Danielson traps, and they are smaller, but they cost less than the big green traps. They're lightweight, pretty good for a kayak, easy to handle. And there is just the one door, so it makes it a little harder for a crab to find the door. But they're nice little traps. If you're using a kayak or something like that, I would recommend something like this. One of the most common ways to catch Dungeness crab is with a crab ring. It's actually two rings, an inside ring, smaller one, and an outside ring connected by the mesh. And it fits loosely so that when you lift it up, it creates a bowl. So you could use a bait bag or a small bait box for this, but we usually just zip tie a piece of chicken or 2 or 3 pieces of chicken onto the bottom there. If you zip tie, especially if it's a drumstick, it's easy to zip tie tight and it won't come off. So we've got our bait on there. We throw it down in the water. It sits on the bottom there. The float holds the ropes up out of the way of the crab and just sits there, and the crab are able to just walk right onto it. They smell the chicken, see the chicken. They just walk onto that ring, and you let it sit down there for about 15 minutes or so. Sometimes less, sometimes more, just depends on how active they are. But then you pull it up, and they get caught in the bowl, and they can't get out. It's pretty slick. Rings are used primarily on docks and piers. They are sometimes used on boats, but only if you're going to be checking your rings very often in your boat, because if you leave this down there for 2 or 3 hours, your bait's going to be picked clean and there are going to be no crabs in your trap. The next one we have here is a crab hawk. You can use it with this line, or you can hook a fishing line onto this swivel. It's a big swivel here. It's made to do either way. And you put your bait on, similar to a crab ring, just zip tie a piece of chicken or something like that on there. When you pull it up, it'll sit flat in the ocean. When you pull it up, it will trap the crab just in that netting, and it works pretty well. Getting it into a good spot can be tricky, but it's kind of a neat deal. It's fun. It's pretty active. You can just throw it out there for a few minutes, leave it there, and reel it in every 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. And a lot of times you'll have activity there. You can use these at jetties or even at the beach, in the bay. You can use it off a pier. Pretty versatile. It's not terribly difficult to lose gear if you do it by jetties, get it caught in the rocks and that sort of thing though. So this is the snare. This is one of the simplest and cheapest ways to go after Dungeness crab. It's got the little loops for the snare on there. It's got a little bait box. You just put your bait in there. You can stuff little chunks of chicken or fish or whatever it is in there, latch it down, and then you can use it on a fishing pole like this, or you can send it out with a rope, kind of like the crab hawk had on it. So of course the crab have 8 legs and the 2 claws, and they just get in there and they're going after the bait, and they get their claws in there and they get all tangled up, and when you reel them in, they will get caught on there. You'll end up likely getting smaller crabs than if you have a pot or maybe a ring. Bigger crabs don't seem to go after it quite as much, but it's pretty active, and it really can be a lot of fun. The next way is you can get Dungeness crab with a rake. You can use a cultivator type rake like this one here and attach a flashlight on it if you're going to do it at night. That's pretty popular. You go in about 3 inches there into the sand and pull there and just back and forth, and sometimes they'll be right on top.
But a lot of times you'll just hear for a little click, kind of like clamming, and when you hear the click, then you'll kind of pry them up there, and they'll be easy, and you just kind of got to be careful not to hurt them too much, because a lot of them might not be big enough, or they might be females, and you can't keep them anyway. Once you do have them, you pull them out of the sand or off the top, then you really just want to kind of corral them with the rake, whichever rake you're using. You can corral them, and then you can kind of pick them up with the rake there. They'll latch on to that a lot of times, and it's pretty easy to grab them and then measure them and check male, female, that sort of thing. If you do go out at night, it's best to have a PFD and a buddy.
And the last way that we'll talk about today is just picking them up with your hands. You can do it. You usually have to be, in the water wading and maybe in the surf at times, but we have caught crabs that way and we have caught keepers that way. So it is possible to do that and legal. So the next thing you'll need is some place to put your crab. We generally like to use 5-gallon bucket. It'll hold about 12 crab, which is the amount you can keep in Oregon. It's kind of nice because it has a handle and a lid. That's pretty handy when you're hauling it up to the truck. When you are accumulating the crab, you definitely want to keep them on ice or to keep seawater in there that's refreshed occasionally. You want to keep it oxygenated or they'll die. So that's very important. You do not want dead crabs. The other option we have here, besides this bucket, is like a bigger tote. This is a tote, one of the smaller totes from Costco. It will hold about 24 keepers, somewhere in that neighborhood. It does have handles on the side, but they're not as good as the handle in the bucket, and it'll be twice as heavy, so we prefer the bucket. So the last piece of gear we'll talk about is the crab measuring tool. This is it's very cheap, it's very easy to use. You just put it across the back, the shell, the carapace of the crab. In Oregon, it has to be from the inside to the inside there, and we'll show you later exactly how to put that on the crab. In Oregon, it's 5 3/4. In Washington, it's 6 inches. In California, it's 6 1/4 inches. And they're all on there. You can use this one measure for any of the states.
Now you could use a tape measure, or some people say you could measure it with a dollar bill because it's about the right size. But because of the curvature of the shells, it's just better if you use one of these crab measures. They're cheap, they're really easy to use. That's definitely what I would recommend. So now we're back out on the water, and we'll show you how we throw our pots, some do's and don'ts to throwing pots. After we get them soaking, then we'll look at some underwater footage while we talk about different kinds of bait, what is good to use, what is bad to use, some that might be okay to use, and then we'll also have a few other pointers before we pull our pots and see how we do.
Yeah. All right, it's a beautiful day out here in the bay. Got a little bit of swells going on. We're gonna drop, we're in about 16 feet of water. Doing a little experiment on the bait this time. It's a little bit of the remnants of some chicken soup. We don't really expect a lot of success, but you never know. So we'll be throwing off here, right about here, anywhere here. Too close? Yeah. Brady says we're too close. We'll move out away from the rocks a little bit. It is raining, a little bit of hail. Beautiful spring day. All right, whenever you're ready. Throw some buoy out first. And the pot, first pot is in the water soaking with chicken soup. Okay, this is one of the baits that we've had the most success with. Really like it, is cockles. So that's where we're going with cockles with this pot. We're going to throw them here. Look like read this. Drop number 2, pot number 4. 4. 15 feet. Yeah, this is not a right range. pot number 3 is some old sand shrimp that can't be used anymore. Which pot are you on? This one. Oh, that can't be used anymore for fishing. So we're gonna try it. It's pretty nasty, but who knows? And some people will say that nasty bait is the best. We generally disagree with that. Most times it's fresh bait, but here we are trying some nasty bait. Number 3, what 7? Or 7, 12 feet. All right. What do you like here? Right? Yeah. This next drop, we're doing some old chicken, some chicken that we've used in pots before and refroze, and now we'll see what happens. We've had luck with it before. I think we're ready anytime you're ready. Not sure, but we'll be all right. Pots in the water. Yeah, whenever you're ready. 10 feet of water. Alright, we'll cinch that up. Got some old chicken and some new chicken in that, guys. Cinch it up. We're going to put that bait bag right in the middle as best we can, so that it doesn't go to the edge and the crabs can't get to it from the outside. Latch it down. Look at our depth. 10 feet, we're good. We caught crabs anywhere from 35 feet out here to 7 feet. Alright, one more pot to drop. New chicken, old chicken. Be about 10 feet of water. And then we'll do a little fishing and come back and see if we have any crabs. We always have some. Probably only going to pull the pots one time each this time. Usually we do it more than one. Probably only one time, so who knows? But we'll let it soak longer than usual. So, all right.
Oh,
depth is
9 foot, 10 foot. How do you?
Oh God!
Exit.
This stupid thing. I took this off because I took this up to look at the foam.
Yeah.
Oh, exit. Yeah.
Oh.
But I didn't put this back on yet, and it goes like this, right?
Oh, and you were sitting on the edge of it and fell. Oh, ow!
You can imagine. It wasn't terrible, but
probably could have been a lot worse.
Could have been a lot worse.
So now we've got our pots soaking, and while we watch this underwater footage, we'll talk about bait options. For each type, we'll talk about how effective it generally is, how easy it is to obtain, how expensive it is, and we'll touch on some problems with certain types of bait. So let's start off with probably the most popular bait and definitely one of the most effective, and that would be raw chicken. You can use legs, thighs, breasts, it doesn't really matter. We prefer the legs because they're easy to stuff in any bait box or bait bag, and they're really good if you want to zip tie them to something like a ring or a crab hawk or something like that. Just the way that they're shaped, you can zip tie it on so that it just can't come off. As we said, it's very effective in tests that we've done. They're not side-by-side scientific tests, of course, but as much as we can test it, we have definitely found that chicken works as well as just about anything else. We have one other favorite that we would say performs a little bit better. Chicken is, of course, easy to obtain. You can get it at any grocery store. The best way that we've found to get it is Costco. You can get it for 99 cents a pound most of the time. Freeze it, And you want it frozen when you put it down anyway, if possible. It'll last a little bit longer, but so it's easy to obtain, and it's as cheap as just about any other kind of bait. So probably the next most popular type of bait is fish. People will use salmon, shad, they'll use heads, whole carcasses, whatever. And it works pretty good for crab. The knock on fish is that seals and sea lions like it too. So if there are very many of those in the area, you might want to stay away from that. Fish for crab bait is fairly easy to come by. If you go to the sporting goods store, they'll have different types of fish for you to try. It's not cheap, but it's probably a little more than chicken, but not a lot. It's not too bad as far as price goes. The next type of bait we're going to talk about will be clams. Clams is our favorite type of bait. We seem to do the best, get the best crabs, even the biggest crabs, when we use clams. We use cockles. Sometimes we use razor clams if we have some razor clam scraps or something like that. Many of the commercial crabbers, they will say that razor clams are the best bait there is. It's not easy to come by, razors especially, but even cockles, it can be a little bit of work and a little bit of an endeavor to get them. So it's not like just going to the store and buying chicken, but clams are definitely our favorite when it comes to bait. One other type of bait that you might see on the Oregon coast would be mink. They have mink farms and they sell the mink carcasses to the sporting goods stores, and you can buy it as bait. We've tried it. It doesn't seem bad, doesn't seem great. It's a little more expensive than chicken, so I don't know why you go for that when chicken works really good. So we steer away from it, but it is an option. And then another one that we've tried is roadkill. Sometimes you can get a possum or a porcupine, maybe a raccoon, things like that, and give them a try. We have tried a couple of those, and you do have to be careful and make sure you're doing it legally. Some of them have to be salvaged, as they call it, different than others, but you can try those, and we did okay with those two, but again, it was not better than chicken and not better than clams. You can also buy crab attractant. You just put it on the chicken or whatever bait you're using, and it's supposed to help that. We tried it just a little bit. Didn't seem to make a lot of difference, but we didn't give it a real good test. So that is another option that you can try. So we've talked about our favorite type of bait, which is clams, followed closely by chicken. And now we'll talk just a bit about what we think is the worst kind of bait. And it's one that we had very high hopes for originally, and that's mussels. Mussels seem to be so similar to clams, and clams do so well. We thought, well, you can harvest 72 mussels a day in Oregon. They're relatively easy to get, especially in some spots. You can just grab about as many as you want. It would be easy and cheap, and if they were as good as clams, it would be fantastic. So we had really high hopes. Turns out they're just the worst repellent. It really does seem like crabs don't want anything to do with them. They say not to use octopus as crab bait because octopus are supposedly their natural enemy. So I don't see how it could be, but maybe mussels are an enemy of the crab as well. To sum up how each type of bait did on this day, the cockles did very good, the chicken did very good, the combination of both of those, of course, did very good. The remnants of the chicken soup was surprisingly pretty good. I don't know that I'd use it again, but it was just some chicken soup that was going to go to waste, and even had some vegetables in there and cooked chicken. So very unusual, but we thought we'd give it a try, and it did attract quite a few crabs, so that was pretty good. The sand shrimp, the nasty sand shrimp that were really way past their prime, did what we expected, which was horrible, probably repelled the crabs. They were really old and really nasty, and usually what we found is crabs prefer fresh bait, so that's how our bait performed on this day. Now we're just about to pull this pot, and we'll show you how to identify a male from a female and how to measure these crabs to see if they're of a legal size. So when you pull the pots up, some of the smaller crabs that are too small to be keepers can get out at times, but if they do fall out, that just means they weren't big enough. So we'll grab this guy right here to show you what a male crab looks like. The males have a much narrower flap. This is the flap here. Males is narrow. The females is a little wider there. Now we'll put the measure on him to see if he's big enough. If you hold it like this, keep your thumb away from those claws. It'd be pretty safe. You put the measure on like this. It needs to go across the carapace there on the inside of those little points. Whoops, lost it there. If the measuring tool will fit down over those points, then it's too small. Now we just need to go through these one by one quickly, see if they're male, female. If they're male and they look big enough, we'll measure them. These are smaller males that I'm throwing back. So here we have a female. You can see this close up. You can see her flap is wider than the male, quite a bit wider. She has a little bit of fuzz in there, a little bit sort of like hairier. The females are generally a little bit thicker bodied, not bigger, but thicker bodied. She has a broken claw there, but she's still pretty feisty there. You can't keep any females in Oregon, and males have to be 5 3/4 inches. Sometimes these guys can be pretty stubborn. They don't want to come out of the trap very easy. So sometimes it's best if they're just, you're having too much trouble, you just tip it and they kind of fall towards the door, and then you can get them. It makes it a little easier. They won't hold on too long when you tip the pot like that. Sometimes it helps to pin them down like on the deck when you're measuring them. It makes it harder for them to move around too much. So now we're headed back to the marina. We've got crab on the boat for dinner. It's been a great day, and it's something about the salt water and the fresh air that it's just always a great day. You can be on the boat, on a pier, on a dock, but if you're on the coast and you're getting Dungeness crab, it's a blast. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or comments, let us know. If you liked it, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.